So my guest today is Sierra Jepsen, who's the lead butcher at Butcher Solutions. Sierra holds a master's degree in meat science from the University of Idaho and now uses her role as lead butcher to provide accessible meat science education so every processor can be well staffed, well informed, and well prepared to serve their customers and their communities. Sierra, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to have a conversation about some meat science.
I am so excited to do this episode because we really haven't done, we're in like the sixth season. We haven't done a butchering kind of themed episode. And this is something that's obviously critically important to sort of culinary education. We want to teach students how to fabricate proteins properly, whether that's meat, fish, vegetables, whatever, it's like we want to make sure that they have that skill set. But your bio kind of like really leans into this meat science thing. And
Mhm.
I don't know if that's something we focus on clearly in culinary education today. So I guess sort of to backtrack, my question to you would be, how did you get into the world of meat science and kind of processing more broadly?
Yeah, so I grew up on a beef cattle farm in Ohio. So and very very Midwestern of us. We had corn, wheat, soybeans, beef cattle, the whole deal. And I knew I loved the livestock industry and the cattle community and farmers and ranchers. They're just great people, and so I knew I wanted to be in that cattle community some way somehow in my future career. I needed cattle. But my sister she was more so of the true blue rancher, and so I was like, okay, how can I have cows but not necessarily be outside every single day, feeding hay, and so it wasn't until my first senior year in college that I tried to get into this beef production class, and it was full, because I was an ag business major and it was an animal science minor. I never wanted to be a vet. And I have a much higher success rate at keeping things dead than I do at trying. But yeah, so I took I took a meat science class instead of beef production. I was like, okay, meat products, beef cattle, same thing, not the same thing. But I found in that meat science class, this is so cool. I get to buy knives instead of books. One of the classes, it was a live dead class. So we evaluated animals in the hoof, and then we brought them into the slaughter facility, and we were the ones to harvest them. And then a couple of days later, we were the ones to cut up the meat products. And I was enamored by the history of the meat processing industry and how, that's, dates back to, Chicago and St. Louis, and some of these, like, these cities were built around meat processing. And, the word Packer, even, the Packers, the football team, that all comes to, packing meat into barrels and, with salts. And we've been dry aging meats for years. And, meat science dates back to, as far as when we could sharpen a rock and, chase an animal down. Meat science is one of the most, ancient forms of food science. And so I was just enamored with and how exciting it is to get that protein to a plate and all the different steps that it takes. And so meat science captivated me pretty quick. I ended up taking a fifth year just to do more meat science when I was in my undergrad career. And then I knew I needed a master's degree, not because I needed it, but because I needed it. Because I wanted to call myself a meat scientist. Like there's no cooler title in the whole world than meat scientist. And so I had taken a job at the University of Wyoming first, and I was the meat judging coach there and worked with college students traveling to packing plants and teaching them about carcass evaluation and some of our basic primal cuts. But college students are my favorite group to work with because they're just so hungry to learn. And then after that, I decided, it was time for me to go back and get my master's as well. And then my business was kind of born from an idea that, kind of sprouted even before I went and got my master's. So, I love the meat sciences. I kind of think about it, as if you think in the culinary world, there's a difference between a cook and a chef. And that you have to go and you have to get that further education, and it takes a lot of time. And so that's it's the difference between being a butcher and a meat scientist, and there is this separation between those two groups. In the United States, to be a butcher, you don't need a certificate. You don't need, it takes more training to be a barber than it does to be a butcher, and it takes more certifications. But if we just need more people to be butchers, and those folks don't need this huge formal education the way that you need to be a meat scientist or a food scientist or a culinary expert. And so I kind of realized that there was this big gap of folks that weren't able to get a high quality butcher education and then just dive into the field, because sometimes you only learn by doing.
So that's obviously an amazing connection kind of from your world to my world. And, you're right. Like even to put it in my camp, like you can be a cook just by learning to cook on, YouTube, or you can go work in a restaurant and, you can learn the ways of one or two or three chefs. And this is sort of one of those sort of existential, you know, debates. Is culinary education worth it? Is butcher education, is meat education worth it? And of course that differs depending on who you are and your different experiences and your situations in life. But one of the things that I've realized, and maybe this relates to butchering and fabrication as well, and meat science, is education is important no matter how you get it. And if you're limiting your exposure to a certain skill via one chef or one butcher, like I use the example of, you work in a butcher shop in Massachusetts where I live, and that's the only place you ever worked. You're only going to have so much information at your disposal. And, I'm not one who says you have to go to butcher at school or culinary school, but you should
Mhm.
always seek out further education.
Yes.
And I think that that's a really important message, because what you're trying to do here is to bridge the gap of people that have, sort of foundational skills, and then to bring them along and give them more information that can ultimately make them more successful in their career. Is that right?
Oh, 100%. And I mean, okay, let's boil this down, even just think about meat science and regionality. So I mean, you're 100% right. Even with my education, it's like, okay, I learned to be a butcher at Ohio State, which is the Midwest, heart of the Midwest there. And then I went to the University of Wyoming, and then I did my master's in Idaho. And so I kept jumping time zones, and just the differences in the livestock production is wild. In Ohio and in the eastern time zone, we can raise 10 cattle per acre, and then in the west they're raising one cow calf pair per 10 acres. And so just the production of the livestock is different, the terminology. But thinking about the cuts of meat in California, the tri-tip is king. The tri-tip is stuck, probably, I don't know, it hasn't made its way to the East Coast yet. It's stuck somewhere in like Missouri. And, Ohio and the East Coast, they don't know what the tri-tip is. And yet that's like this instrumental cut. If the entire beef animal could be made of tri-tip, that's what California and Idaho and Wyoming, that's what they want. Thinking about dry aging and the molds, there are regionally different molds that grow on dry aged meat products in the West, in the South, and the Northeast, just based on air and humidity and regionality. There's some really interesting meat science research there. And then you're right, just learning from the differences in folks who actually butcher every single day and produce meat products for customers. What sells in the Northeast does not sell the same in the Southwest. And I recently had the opportunity to have be on a butchery competition team, and we went to Paris to compete in the Butcher Olympics, which was awesome. And I was on a team with folks from California, New York City, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Utah, and you bet your bottom dollar every single one of us had different ways to cut things, different ways to break things down. And there's so much to say about taking the time to humble yourself and realize it's like, just because I know a lot about the meat sciences, the culinary world, doesn't mean that I have a grasp on what the entire United States does, because it's such a big country. And regionally, I mean, look at barbecue. The difference in Missouri barbecue to Texas barbecue is wildly different. That's the differences between sauces and rubs. And so it's amazing. I mean, the melting pot of America really is true, but the butcher block of America is just as vast.
I mean, that's so amazing because it speaks so much to the mission of your company is this idea of providing accessible information to anyone who really is craving it. And you're right, like perspective is everything, right? You think you know what you know until you go somewhere else. Like, and you mentioned Paris, like, or you can put any world city in there, Tokyo, like go somewhere else in the world and you realize what you don't know very quickly. But can you talk about how sort of Butcher Solutions, the company that again you're sort of driving the bus on here, is how are they making that kind of broad perspective and education more accessible?
Yeah. And so I think about myself, and as I started off in the academia world, in
Hmm.
academic meat science. That's how I really cut my teeth on the butcher block, and really have this connection to these pristine meat processing facilities where the conditions are perfect and great, and then making this crossover and thinking about the actual butchers of the world where not everything is academic. It's about moving product and it's about serving your customers. And so there is this divide between academic and what can we control, what should we control, what are the sciences behind everything, and then the production, the butchery, the actual meat and potatoes of the industry. And there's a disconnect. There is, between the academic world and the actual realistic production side of things. And so that's where I kind of find myself, where yes, I'm a meat scientist, I got my master's degree, but I'm not doing the science every single day. And then same thing, it's like I am a butcher, I do help people process meats, but I'm not running the shop every single day. And so I found myself in this really like nice little gray area where it's like I can connect back to why the science matters, but then how does that science actually help people
Mm.
in the real world? And does the science that the meat scientists are doing in academia, does it matter? Does it help push more product? Does it help sell a higher quality product? Does it help our culinary folks understand something new or find a new cut? And so it's, Butcher Solutions is about connecting people to the resources that they need to be successful in the meat sciences. And sometimes that's a livestock producer that wants to build a branded meats program. Sometimes
Mm.
that's an extra small or a very small meat processing facility that is killing anywhere from 10 to 100 animals a week, and they want to go faster, or they want to learn a new innovative cut that's going to help them make money. Because in the butchery world, we can make money either by quantity or quality. I mean, hopefully all of your products are high quality, but quantity would be, let's have a very simple streamlined cut sheet and let's move carcasses fast. Or that high quality value added piece would, all right, we're going to have a very niche cut sheet that includes the Delmonicos and the flat irons and the Denver steaks and the sirloin tender and the Terrace major. I got hooked on meat science with all the scientific names of muscles, so I could talk Latin meat muscles all day. But and so helping people with whatever aspect of meat science that they need is really critical, because like you mentioned, culinary science is pretty much impossible to learn. Not impossible, people try to do it just by watching YouTube. That will get you to be a cook. That doesn't necessarily get you to be a chef. And same thing
Right.
with butchery, where you can read a book, you can watch YouTube videos, but until you're actually working with a knife on a block with a piece of meat in front of you, you don't know where those seams are at. You don't know how this joint disconnects. How deep do I have to go? How tough is this ligament to work through? How much pressure do I apply to make a smooth cut? How do I sharpen my knives? Like, there's just so much. This is a very tactile industry, both culinary
Yes.
and butchery. And until you actually have your hand on a knife and you're working through those food products, you don't know what you don't know.
And honestly, it's the repetition too, because if doing it once or twice. I mean, obviously that's not nearly enough, right? And the bigger the protein, the more expensive it gets to do this over and over and over again. So having resources available that can kind of bridge the gap, as we said before, can make it a little bit more digestible. Can you talk a little bit about some of like the success stories that you've seen I mean, you've connected your work a lot to really impacting the community. Whether it's the big guys or the small retail shops. Are there kind of examples you can provide of how this sort of supplemental information, education, instruction has sort of benefited economies, or improved public food safety, or just really enhanced the emphasis on craftsmanship within the trade itself?
Yeah, I'm thinking about last spring. I was bouncing coast to coast, basically on a weekly basis. I had two jobs running at the same time. One was in Kentucky. There was a meat processor there, brand new. They had a goal. They wanted to kill 100 a day. Beautiful facility. They had hired about 22 butchers. Excuse me, 22 people. These folks had they came from a Nestle facility, from a Toyota manufacturer. So they had never held a knife before, and they were going to run this facility. So I was working that job, which was fairly large, training folks who had never held a knife. Basically how to turn out a lot of really high quality meat products for this community. And, I was spending weeks on end with them. And then I was jumping to a job in Arizona, where these two backyard butchers, more or less, their wives had called me and said, "Hey, our husbands have been feeding out these cattle, and we attempted to harvest some last week. It didn't go great. So we think that they need some meat science education." So then I flew out with them and was doing a kill and some fabrication with them for other times. So I was kind of bouncing between these two jobs, with training a large group of butchers and then training these backyard butchers. And then while that meat was hanging, then I was going back to the Kentucky job. And I think that really goes to show the scope of meat science and the basic understanding for how do we have ethical kills of animal? How does that welfare relate to meat products? How do we chill beef carcasses, pork carcasses, lamb carcasses, poultry? How do we ensure a safe food product for our food system? How do we label and name cuts? How do we keep that consistent? And what I'm realizing is it doesn't matter if our folks are working in this, a large industrial facility that is still providing products from local meat process, livestock producers, to a local community. That's as local as it gets. Those people still need to understand chilling and aging and proper cutting techniques, and how to label those meat products correctly, and how to communicate to the consumer how that meat product needs to be cooked. They have to know all of that just to be a butcher. Same thing to these two gentlemen, neighbors, raising their own critters, backyard. That's a local product. They still need to know animal welfare, chilling, food safety, how to cut it, what to name it, how to cook it. It does not matter how large of a scale this is. Meat processing, meat production, it is local on every single level. These animals, they are in our own backyards, our own communities. These are real families raising these animals. And the butcher is the last line of defense to make sure that that meat product is representative of what that livestock producer just spent 2 years raising. And the butcher is actually, correction, the chef is the last line of defense. The butcher is the good connection to make sure that the consumer and the producer, they talk to each other, they know what happened. But it does come down to the chef to make sure that that meat product, if it hits the table in a cooked form, rather than the consumer buying it raw, the chef is actually the last line of defense. So chefs having a really good grasp on butchery, of what does go into animal welfare, what does go into food safety, to chilling, to the meat production, to labeling of these cuts, to the cooking methods. Like, all of that does come back to meat science. And there's plenty of different avenues that meat scientists are exploring, trying to make that chef's life easier.
It's undervalued, I think, or it's underappreciated in culinary education, just because there's limited time and limited resources and what have you. The importance of starting with the right product and fabricating it properly, and then ultimately preparing it. Because I think as chefs, we kind of glamorize this idea of like cooking and seasoning and then serving and presenting and tweezers and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, if you're starting out with something that's improperly processed, whether that's from a food safety standpoint or just from a general fabrication standpoint, it ultimately will impact the final product on the plate.
Sure.
So, I would love to see, and again, this is a huge cost, but I would love to see us really kind of shift a little bit more focus on the beginning rather than the end. Because, it kind of goes back to that simplistic way of just approaching food in general is if you start with a really great product, you don't have to do much to it to make it really, really special.
Yeah.
Um, but just for those out there who really want to kind of push the envelope on this, you mentioned earlier, you're into judging and you've done some competitions. Can you talk about like that world of butchery and how you're connected to it and how people that are, let's say, not necessarily seeking out butcher solutions for guidance. Let's talk about the butchers that are killing it in the industry, not well figuratively and literally. That are actually like just like bulletproof. Like, what are they doing to showcase their skill, and how is that recognized on the world stage?
Yeah. And so I guess we can start here by saying the United States is not a competition butchery country in the
Interesting.
way that there are. You know, let's think about the world stage. The competitions that are happening like almost every weekend, these are occurring in Australia, New Zealand, Germany. These countries where butchery is very niche. It requires you all to go through an apprenticeship program to become a butcher. These folks are studying for 2 to 4 years specifically on butchery craft, and I would say that they are more fine-tuned in the world of
Mhm.
combining both butchery techniques with chef techniques. In the United States, we kind of keep those two worlds separate. You can be a butcher, you can be a chef, but not a lot of our butchers have that culinary background. If we think about the Midwest and the West and just some of these just small town communities, they don't have the culinary exposure the way that some of our large cities do in the United States and the way some of these other countries do. And so when I entered some of these competitions, I am not a chef. I like to cook. I'm a cook. I'm not a chef. And so, I come in bringing a lot of knowledge for meat science education, a lot of knowledge for the meat and potatoes of the meat products, but not a lot of that really technical skill. And so I think in the United States, we have some really, really skilled culinary professionals that would actually do really well in these competitions. If, just given a little bit more exposure to a couple opportunities to cut more meat products in a really craftful way. And so, am I the best person to be competing? No. Am I a competitive person who likes to, challenge myself? Yes. And so here in the United States, we have our Team USA for the Butcher Olympics. It's called Butchers of America. And so if you've got some cool knife skills and you like cutting up meat products, definitely encourage you to reach out Butchers of America on Instagram. Our goal is, yes, we enjoyed competing in some of these international competitions, but we want to bring more of that competition style to the United States and be able to have more home turf competitions here because we have a lot of really skilled butchers in the United States. We don't have a lot of opportunity to showcase those folks. And many of them,
Mhm.
they're still in school or they are running their own shops. And so do they have time to go and, compete in a weekend competition in Germany? No. They are busy like being the bread maker for their facility. And so it'd be awesome if we can bring more of these competitions to home turf. So the most, the one that's upcoming here, the best butcher competition is being held at the Penn State Meat Lab on May 15th, 2025. And so that's being sponsored by the Northeast Beef Council and the Pennsylvania Beef Council. And they're bringing in a lot of our, Northeast butchers, and they're going to have a little competition. So I think competitions are always a great way to showcase what you know, get creative, have that space to be creative, because a lot
Yeah.
of times we don't have professional space to exercise those muscles and timed just the permission to make some mistakes and to do whatever we want. And so I think that's what's really exciting about having butchery and culinary competitions, because then it's like, oh, what that person did over there is really, really cool. And I actually think that that would sell. Or what that person did was really, really cool, but I don't think that actually would sell. And
Mhm.
having that understanding of, it's like, this would be really, really cool, but it's kind of like fashion, but is it going to catch on?
No, it's important because I mean I love that goal of expanding the reach of that sort of niche part of our industry. Even though it's such a huge part of our industry, it's sort of undervalued, as I said. And I think about like in the U.S. and like I love the U.S., but like what do we prioritize competitions on? It's the end result of butchery. It's barbecue. It's those sort of cooking methods. In reality, the sort of beginning part of that should be as much as celebrated as sort of the actual cooking of it. So I love that goal of promoting butchers and promoting competitions, if only for the idea of seeing what other people are doing,
Yes.
because that's a great way. Going back to the beginning of what we were talking about, education is important no matter how you get it, right? And competitions, even if you lose, is super educational because then you learn how to be better the next time. You learn what other people are doing. It's just such an important skill, and we push students to do it. But it's scary. It's like you're in an uncomfortable setting. You're maybe traveling abroad, and you're out of your sort of safe space. But the value of doing that is it far outweighs any sort of like vulnerability you have to expose yourself to.
But every time I enter a competition of any kind, or I used to be in 4-H and FFA, and I would do speaking competitions. And when you're in high school, you get to play sports all of the time, and in college there are opportunities to compete. And once you get into the professional world, the opportunity to be competitive is few and far between. And so you have to seek out opportunities. It's like, okay, I want to run this race this weekend. I want to join this team to be on the World Butchers, challenge. It takes effort to find the opportunity to be competitive. And whether or not you have that innate competitive nature is that's neither here nor there, but I think it's important to push yourself into that competitive piece as much as you can. And you do have to seek out those opportunities. They aren't just presented to you the way that they were when you were younger. And so that's a big risk then to take, of like, okay, I might lose, or I might, really get humbled here, but that's okay, because, putting
Yeah.
yourself under that time pressure of, okay, I've only got so many weeks to prepare for this. And then in the competition, okay, I have to get this done in 5, 10, 15 minutes, a couple of hours, whatever you get. That mental stress is so good for your own cognitive development throughout the rest of your life.
100%, 100%. Could not agree with you more. I just think it's the best thing you can do, and it's scary, but it's just the best. So I want to just kind of end this on a kind of a fun note. I got a kind of a quick fire round of just some questions. You mentioned you're a cook, so what is your favorite? I mean, knowing you might say tri-tip, I'm going to say tri-tips off the table.
No, it's
What
okay.
is your favorite cut of meat to prepare? And it doesn't have to be beef; it can be anything.
Sure. Let's see. I have been getting okay. We are hunters. I'm in Montana. My fiance, he kills a lot of cool things, and I get to butcher them. So I
Nice.
have been having a lot of fun with our wild game. So moose, elk, antelope, and so I've been doing a lot of creative, innovative cutting, turning those cuts into the same cuts that we can get off of a beef carcass. So the flat iron off of a moose, the rolled leg off of an antelope, doing a stuffed backstrap off of an elk. So yeah, transforming wild game into the same cuts that we get off of beef carcasses.
All right, so now the inner chef in me is getting excited because, like, I'm from New Hampshire. We also have moose here. I mean, I've never seen a moose. I've never killed a moose. If I did, it would be with my car, and it probably wouldn't end well for me. But at the end of the day, I love that idea of leveraging, the sort of the not the less popular cuts, but the ones that maybe aren't as readily accessible, right? And so I'm a mushroom forager, so I go out in the woods and I'm always trying to find things that aren't common, right? I'm trying to find things that aren't mass produced because I think the flavor there is untapped, right? It's just so much. And the moose is I've never worked with moose, so it's great to hear that the flat iron is the way to go. All right. So if I deal with a lot of students, a lot of them are actually really interested in butchering, meat fabrication, processing, and then all onto charcuterie and meat processing and cooking. What would one piece of advice you would give be to a student entering that? Like they graduate from culinary school and they're like, I want to be a butcher. Like, what is the one piece of advice you would give them?
You have to take care of your body. And I mean this in the most physical sense of
Mm,
butchery is an extremely physical trade. Of it is cold, wet concrete. In the United States, we have industrial facilities for butchery. It's not always this super classy, awesome place as much as we want it to be. And so it's heavy work. It's lifting 90-pound chucks in hindquarters. It's repetitive wrist movement. It's hard on your knees. It's hard on your feet. And so I think if you don't take care of your body, you're not going to last long in butchery. And that's something I look at my own genetic pool and I wonder, it's like, am I built to be a butcher long term? And so, especially as a petite lady, I think that makes it really excellent as I'm training butchers too. Older folks and young ladies, like they realize, oh, I don't have to be this hulking 200-pound man in order to work in butchery, but you have to work smart. You have to use gravity.
yes.
You have to recognize when this is a two-person lifting job rather than a one-person, or use your rails. Yes, take stretching breaks. And so I think, like in any culinary field, you have to recognize that yes, we're working with knives. We have to pay attention, but also paying attention to your body and recognizing when a chiropractor is necessary.
Mm.
It's important for the long haul.
Such great advice because I think any job that uses your hands, taking care of your body, I mean, it just propels and extends your ability to do this job longer, which I
Mhm.
think is the goal for everyone. Right? Everyone wants to be happy in what they're doing for as long as they can do it. Um, Knowing that, like maybe the answer could be the same, I'm going to ask for a different one. What is the most misunderstood concept about meat processing?
Oh, misunderstood concept. I would say, okay. Um, the names of cuts are confusing. And so I would say
100%.
that's on us. That's on the butchers from the days old. Why have we created such a confusing system of naming cuts? And regionally, what you call a Delmonico in one part of the country is not the same as another part. The Delmonico is from the chuck rib separation. It's basically a ribeye, but it's on the chuck side, just so
Yeah.
everybody knows that. So anyway, so I think it is confusing the way that cuts are named and identified, and so trying to make it a mission to know the names of your cuts, recognize that they can be different in different parts of the world, different parts of the United States, but
Mm.
trying to really learn and understand the correct names for those cuts is my life song.
Is there a resource or is there a particular place that you go to when you're looking to get? I mean, I know you already know, but like if for someone who wants clarity and they want to get a more verified source on what a specific cut is called, is there a better resource out there that they can look at? Is there something that you use?
Sure. I like to always go back to our beef council, the pork board, and the lamb board, because yep, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association has put a lot of time and money into developing resources for this is what this cut looks like, and this is a universal name for it.
Mm.
Pork, same thing. Lamb, same thing. This is what this cut looks like. Sometimes they even have resources on those websites of how to cut it. Sometimes they're videos, sometimes they're visuals of where to cut and find those seams. And so when in doubt, okay, I always go back to those academic industry sources. Yes, there's
And then,
and then you can Google that on YouTube,
yeah.
but start there.
And those sources are usually built of representatives from across, like, or stakeholders from across different regions. So
Yeah.
they kind of bridge the differences and kind of create commonalities, which I think is
Mhm.
important.
And those folks are the perfect crossover between the academic and the
Yeah.
industry. And so they really are trying to make things more universal.
Love that tip. Love that tip. All right, last thing. I mean, you've traveled the world, you do a lot of butchering. Is there an area of the industry or a person in the industry that you haven't worked with that you would love to just pick their brain, be in a room with, that you feel like you could still learn from? And that could be an individual, an institution, whatever.
Oh man. Okay. I love watching. Okay. I love competing and judging butchery competitions. I think there would be a lot of fun and unique. Let's work with Gordon Ramsay. I mean, let's work
Yeah.
with somebody who is a really awesome chef. And you all know more chefy people than I do. But I think hosting some kind of a cook-off butchery competition crossover would be super fun. So whoever that would be in your culinary world, where we could have a butchery competition followed by a chef competition. Pair a butcher with a chef together. That would be super fun.
I love that. It's very, like, community, and it's bringing people together, and it's everything that we should be doing in the world. Sierra, this was great. I really appreciate the conversation. Before I let you go, where can people find more information about you, Butcher Solutions? Where should they go to check it out?
Sure. Yep. So on Instagram is a great place. Butcher Solutions LLC. I'm a one woman show, and so if my hands are on a knife and in meat, that means I'm not running social media. So I'm working really hard to make that really robust and really exciting for everybody. But you can also find me just on the interwebs, butchersolutionsllc.com. My phone number, my email is on there. If you have questions, if you want to reach out, let's go for it. Would love to make my way to your part of the world. We can do some butchery demos. We can get in person, a little bit more hands-on. That is what butchery is all about.
I love it. Sierra Jepsen, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.